this again.
27. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. I'd like to call the standing committee meeting for October 27th, 2020 to order. Council, any changes to the agenda? We have a motion to adopt.
I'll move that we adopt standing committee meeting for October 27th, 2020.
Okay, all those in
That's
favor?
a question.
Yes.
Just if there's any additions for administration.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's that. And all those in favor? Thank you. We'll move on next to our medical council. Ms. Anderson, do we have anyone?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. We will move on with our delegations and presentation. Our first delegation is the Hinton Avenue Design Charrette, presented by Nick Price. Good afternoon. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Well, that's great. So I see we're in a different format than when we last met. So is it okay if I start the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully. Let me know when you can see the screen.
We're good.
You're good? So firstly, hopefully you've all had a chance to review the report. I'm assuming that was sent out beforehand. It's fairly comprehensive. So what I want to do is just do a short presentation going through key aspects of the report and some of the recommendations. So first of all, just starting with what the project objectives were here. First of all, looking at the best utilization of the town-owned lands. Diversification of Hinton's housing inventory certainly came through some of the engagement in terms of creating some affordable housing and tiny homes. The development that's conscious of and complementary to the existing development and housing that is both financially attainable and sustainable. The project process that we went through, we did research and preparation for the design charrette, so there's quite a bit of work done beforehand. Then thank you all for your participation over those 4 days of doing the design charrette. Hopefully you found it interesting to see how the design evolved to the preferred, which I thought was very helpful, and certainly appreciated your input, as well as that of the public who participated. We've gone away and we've prepared a report as well as a pro forma. Now, just in context, the pro forma that's prepared, this is a glimpse as of today of what it might look like, give you an idea around costs. So keep in mind, and then probably, next month, the cost could completely change, and it's a very high level look at it with 20% contingencies put into those cost estimates. So just put that in context when we get into the pro forma, which is a key part of the presentation today. And then today is obviously the presentation of council, and subject to the outcome today, hopefully we'll be able to move forward with some implementation. Oh, sorry, slide jumped. Getting used to. Hopefully you can see my cursor here. So this was the overall preferred plan. If you recall, we had tiny homes up in this area. We have for seniors, the duplex in here, and this is our higher elevation. Then we drop down a little bit. So these we have as duplexes or townhomes. They could be through here. And then we're looking at sort of a 4-story multi-unit residential. We have a professional service center along with sort of hopefully some sort of retail with residential above. So that would be around 3 to 4 stories in this area. This area over here, we're looking in the short term as being sort of a storage facility, and there are a number of reasons for that, but in the long term, it could have a multi-unit residential. The design around this had looked at creating a central sort of park core for the community, along with a multi-purpose recreational facility. This is currently designed as a public road. We could reduce costs through if you had a joint partner who worked on all of this, that could become a private road, which would mean you could reduce possibly the standard of the road width, which could also reduce the cost. But for the purpose of this design, we went with a public road through this connection point. What we've also done is looked at staging. Part of the engagement we undertook was with a lot of developers in this field of development to gauge their input. And I actually followed up after our engagement with Greg Christensen on just getting some feedback from him as well, which was extremely valuable. So in terms of, excuse me, hopefully you can see my cursor here. You can see this is phase one, which would be sort of the tiny homes building up this area. And then what we mentioned, and this came up through the discussion, was there were sort of doctors, because this is looking at a medical type facility. And if there was that interest currently, because during the engagement, someone mentioned that, hey, someone's already looking at create a professional sort of clinic, medical clinic, I would recommend trying and get that, capture that now, because this is a key anchor for part of the rest of the concept through the development. In stage one, we're also looking at creating this as a storage facility. It's sort of an easy win. So this first phase was around looking at easy wins, and that's key to understand. So from a servicing point of view, and in reading the report, we'll speak to this in later phases, but here, in terms of the tiny homes, this is an easy win. We can easily connect into the existing services with any even downstream impacts. My understanding from engineers, there's capacity to accommodate for that. So that could be an easy win. Moving forward in terms of phase two, and sorry, the time frame I put here is 2021 to 2024. So when I say that 2024 would be the completion, construction anticipated, and move in. So that's the goal in terms of phasing. Phase two here, we anticipate so around 2024 to 2027, and it could come earlier, depends how the market moves. And it could be done with phase one, but we're taking baby steps here. And that's to do with these multi-duplex units, again, for seniors. My understanding is that there is capacity in the system to connect in further down to this area. And the reason I'm raising this is as we go to the next phase, we have to deal with some downstream impacts. So not related to the development, but as we build up this area, there's existing challenges with some of the downstream. And I'm not an engineer, so I won't speak to it specifically. But it is in the report about the need to do some upgrades to the overall sanitary system, is my understanding. So this is phase two. We move into phase three, which is now looking at either the duplexes or townhomes through here. And then going through in terms of phase four, which would be the, this is sort of the retail with some residential on top. And if this doesn't pan out in phase one, we may see that pan out in phase four. Phase five, this would then lead to the multi-unit residential, and then moving into phase, the phases overall of slowly working in the community park. So this would be built out over the time of perhaps the entire phases, depending on the cost profile as we move forward. So what does this all mean? So this is a quick, what I call a table, to give you an indication of what a pro forma looks like and what this table means. So what this table is showing is basically this is the different phases, right, that I outlined at the start. This is based on really this is based on you including the land cost, but you make no money. So this is what the value of, say, a tiny home would be valued at if we included the land cost, so the cost you spent, but there's no profit margin here. So this is something a developer would not proceed with. So what you're ending up with is approximately, and this is our estimate again, very high level, so these costs change, but basically you're looking at around 232,000 for a tiny dwelling, based on all the costs associated with it. Now, if we took out the, sorry, it's the next one is less the land cost. So if we take out land costs, that drops down $225,000. So what that means is you purchase the land, you either, when you sell it, you don't include that actual cost of the land into the cost of the sale. Hopefully that makes sense. So just try and understand the two differences. Then as you go up the table, it basically shows, well, maybe someone, typically when you're doing infill, the minimum a developer wants to profit on is around 15%, but they'd like to go up to in the 20%, 25. I'm considering this as an infill, not necessarily a greenfield. So what we've done here is this is again, the table going up 15% with land costs included, or you sell it you don't sell the land to the developer, you gift it in a way to the developer. So it's just the differences of whether you include that land cost or if you don't, and what it means to that house price as it continues. And this applies to all of the types of developments in each of the phases. And in terms of residential, it comes down to square footage. So sorry, in terms of the commercial retail areas based on square footage. So it's all linked to, and hopefully if you've got any questions on this, please feel free to ask me. I'm not the expert, but I have her right next door. But effectively, what this is showing, what that market cost might be based on including the costs related to the site. And that includes all the infrastructure costs that would be associated with the different phases, with the exception of what those downstream requirements are, because I don't know enough information as to what's needed or the cost to do those upgrades, which don't relate necessarily specifically to the site. This is something that's related to the entire community that needs to be improved. Are there any questions on this? We can ask questions at the end. I'll let you soak all that information in. So then what's next? After, if you as council decide to accept the report, there's sort of three options we've looked at. One is to sell the lands, which is basically you say, well, we've done the concept, here you go, this is the value of the lands, try and see if a developer will take it on board. Option two would be that the town looks to develop, basically become a land developer and looks to develop the lands. And then option three is looking at a collaborative partnership, which is where I think we brought this up in terms of some of the engagement where perhaps you do long life leases on the land and you work in tandem or in collaboration with the developer who focuses on that type of product. Our recommendation is first would be probably option three, which is the collaborative partnership. And then secondly would probably be option two in terms of the development of the lands independently. And part of that reason is we don't feel that there's the saleability on the actual lands overall. So some of the things that need to be done though in going forward and setting this up for the development, one is regarding the zoning, and in context to really what we've created is a master plan and to maintain the integrity of what all the work we've done, we're recommending creating a direct control district. So that would have council have control over if it even went to a developer. It does have greater limitations in terms of a developer wanting to totally invest, but if you have that collaboration, if there are any major changes, that would have to come back to council for approval so that you can track exactly sure, you're making sure that the intent and the objectives of what was set out at the start have been achieved. There's some work that could be carried out immediately regarding some of the title cleanup. So you'll recall where those tiny homes are. There's some remnant parcels of road closures, etc. It just needs to be consolidated around. The servicing analysis. So while this doesn't necessarily impact those tiny homes, the rest of the development really does need to get more detailed on the downstream and understand what needs to be done for upgrades to the downstream infrastructure to accommodate the overall development. There's the caveat that you recall that's registered on the property. It's not an easy thing to remove, but it's something that I think, particularly for the retail moving forward, doesn't totally limit everything retail, but to open that area up in terms of retail, we'd recommend investigating further about how could we remove this covenant to some degree. And that may be collaborating with the person who put in place the covenant. Sometimes it's a cost, but the cost can be very expensive. But we would recommend at least exploring and going down the path to find out, are there options to try and remove that covenant? Funding, if you go down the collaborative path, there's a lot of funding, particularly related to attainable housing, affordable housing, through CMHC and other agencies. And we'd recommend further investigating those opportunities, and that should be done in partnership. And this comes to the last one. It's looking for those partners, whether it's a Christensen group or whether it's another form of developer. It could be with the existing retirement village that's there, in terms of collaborating, particularly in those first phases of the development. Or what I've tried to achieve is those easy wins, which is keeping the capital costs down but trying to allow for development to happen to, move something forward quickly. So there are some of the key actions, and that's all outlined in the report under section 7.3 of the document. So now it's really question time. It's your turn to interrogate me on the report, the findings, and really how you'd like to move forward, or if you have any questions for me. Was everybody able to hear me? Hopefully I was clear enough at your end. I'm always nervous on these sessions.
So any questions, Council? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I guess my question is around the design charrette, and you've done many of these in the past. Did the level of participation at the charrette lead you to feel confident that we're on the right track? Kind of if you have a survey with 2 responses, you can't really you have to take it with a grain of salt. So just kind of the level of participation and what that means for maybe representing the entire community as far as buy-in.
It's a very good question, Councillor. I can tell you my other one I'm dealing with, I've had about 200 people out, but that's because it's a lot more controversial than what your site is. And I think your level of participation often will depend on the level of controversy perhaps associated with the subject matter. What I can say, it was very limited from a public perspective, but the people who did participate and from the stakeholders context, as well as, pretty much from the stakeholders. So when you've got developers who we engaged with, you had people from the retirement facility, you had people from the industry of affordable housing, people who run those types of facilities. And we did have members of the public along, and they were limited, but they were the audience that were targeted for the type of development that you're looking at. And from that, it was very supportive. But it's always difficult to get people to participate in a process. It's one of the biggest challenges we have, because people have got busy lives and they're going around doing everything. It's only until you actually start construction that people start making inquiries often. So I'm not too sure I can answer it directly. It's obviously was more difficult under COVID as well. What I do believe is that you've got the people who did participate provided valuable input, and I believe we met a lot of the objectives that were sought after.
Perfect, thank you, I appreciate that.
And Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Nick, for the presentation. I guess my question is, if we were to go with administration's recommendation, and I guess this would extend to all the options to some extent, what's the flexibility with changing the phasing and potentially changing some of the layout? Any comments regarding that?
In context to changing, I think the direct control will be the tool on whether any changes are made, but there is flexibility. I think should be incorporated some degree of flexibility, but you got to be mindful of, if you change something, you want to make sure that it's financially viable, number one. So 2, your change, if you're going to decrease the density on there, it may help. Well, actually it won't, because the big thing is the cost of the downstream upgrade, is my understanding, which is where you'd probably need the density to support the financials around contributing to that infrastructure upgrade regarding the sanitary system and stormwater system downstream, which relates to the overall community. But I think there needs to be provision within the direct control, like I mentioned, whether it's a public road or a private road, which can improve your costs in terms of how it's done. So that's one area. 2, you might have more townhouses, like rather than, actually I think we've got townhouses at the moment, but you might go duplexes depending on what the market is looking at for. So there's got to be a degree of flexibility. It's just got to make the economics make sense. That's the key.
Thank you.
Councilor McGowan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Nick, I'm just curious, could you elaborate a little bit more on some of the public feedback specific to our senior citizens and how they viewed the tiny home phase 1 development? Because I know it certainly interests me,
Yep.
but I know that seniors housing has been something that we've looked at a number of different times in the past, and there's always been concerns around, you know, parking pads and size of lot, all that sort of thing. What was the feedback you got from the seniors community on the tiny housing?
So it's really interesting. It seems to be an increasing one because, again, I mentioned I spoke to Greg Christensen afterwards. He sent me some examples. They're doing some up in Whitecourt, and they seem very interested in what you're doing here. So that could be a partner in terms of moving forward, because he's shown a lot of interest and likes the product. It's very similar to what they're doing elsewhere. But the feedback we got was really, if we can get it even on the price point that we've shown, if that price point comes in, they reckon they're going to be eaten alive in terms of people wanting them. And the feedback we got from the seniors who did participate, they were extremely excited, but it was linked to the price point. So what I heard, there was a developer in your community who tried to do sort of seniors facilities, but they were selling at $340,000 a piece. And people said, you know, that's crazy. And people try and downsize. The other comment that I heard was from the seniors was really around how there's a lot of people who weren't ready to go into the seniors facility, but they were by themselves, but they had friends in there. So they wanted to be nearby. And I found that a really interesting point. Now, we've only, in terms of the numbers, we've kept them fairly low. We haven't done a lot of them here. So it will be a good test, right, in terms of seeing their take up. But if we can hit that price point that I've got in there around 225, 230, I think you're going to have people, and this comes down also to your design's got to be really well done. Design's really important. But what I've seen, like, again, Greg Christensen's been sending me some of his designs, and that's exactly similar footprint to what we've just shown almost. It was quite surprising. This was after I followed up because he couldn't quite participate in the session. And it's a good little product.
Then I'm sure I could speak to that last one. That's okay. Thanks a lot for that, Nick. And that's actually exactly what I remember hearing when we looked at seniors housing possibilities near to Bhutan in the past, was that $330,000+ price point was just too high, and it was putting out some of our seniors. So I appreciate you commenting on that, because that's exactly what I've heard in the past. So thank you.
So, Nick, I have a question. Phase 1, is an easy tie-in with the infrastructure from that street. Would phase 2 be tying in from phase 1 or from Pine Valley? How would that work?
Yeah, so Councillor, phase 2 is really, I think it could tie into phase 1, but it really comes down to detailed design. Keep in mind, we're just doing high-level analysis to look at capacity system. I do believe it's benefit to tie into phase 1 because my understanding, there's capacity in the system down, along the road there, compared to going the other way. And so we may be able to get some quick wins off that type of development in those 2 phases. And I'd have to leave it to my engineering friends to make that where that cutoff point is before you need to start working on that downstream. And that's why I'm saying one of the recommendations, you need to really do more analysis on what needs to be done in the downstream to enable capacity for the overall development. Does that answer your question?
You know, I just had a real darn time hearing you. So is there anybody here who can kind of break it down what you said?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that comment.
Yeah, Nick, I couldn't really make out everything you were saying.
Oh, my apologies. It's probably my accent. Can you hear me all right? Can you guys hear me? Thumbs up? Yes? Yeah. So if someone could convey, if I can't get this across through our internet, but phase 2 is looking at the option to connect into the servicing with phase 1 as one of the options, which I believe has the capacity to provide for those duplexes. But what I'm saying is, I know the phase 1's fine, but phase 2 needs probably a little bit more analysis from our engineers to make sure that's got the capacity to accommodate those additional duplexes. And a key part of this is the downstream. So the downstream is related to the stormwater and the sanitary, that in the due diligence highlighted that downstream there's some capacity issues that exist today. But the volume, from my understanding, or the system we're feeding into in this specific area, is not so bad. So that's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. Just have one more question. Phase one would start, if it went ahead in 2021 to 2024. Why that 4 years to build 7 little tiny homes?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The reason when I say that, it's in context to, we don't know exactly the market take up. So we're projecting you've got to do all the subdivision cleanup. There's quite a bit of work that's probably going to take about a year just to get all your detailed design, your building permits, all those things that go on. Then you got construction. So that's maybe another 6 months to do the construction, because it should go relatively quickly. But then you've got to actually get the sales, and the sales are linked to when they do construction and maybe put the buildings on. So it could happen a lot quicker, but it's just to give a gauge of what could be the uptake. Now, if we hit the price point right, they might go in a year. So who knows? But from a phasing point of view, it's always good to just have a little bit of buffer on expectations.
Good, thank you. Councilor Wheeler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Nick, and really when we start looking into how the public would view the potential options here, this is important for me. So my understanding of the strengths of the shared or the partnership approach is that we essentially defer some of the potential risks across multiple partnerships, as well as, of course, trying to come up with the initial capital for the project. And the benefit is, of course, is that we're gaining partners who have expertise in the development field, in the construction fields, that sort of thing. Is that sort of a fair analysis if a citizen is asking me, why would we, if we choose to engage in a collaborative partnership on this, why is that the right answer? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, the partnership could be set up as simple as you as the municipality don't necessarily front the cost, but you may be the person who leases the land in a long-term lease arrangement. In fact, Greg Christensen raised that again in the discussion. I remember him saying, oh, just do a long-term lease, right? So that might be, so what that means is you could have a really low rate on your lease, like $1 a year or something, to take out that land cost or whatever that agreement might be. But the developer is the one responsible to develop the site. So it depends how you look at it in that context. The collaboration could be that you'll cover off the, just some of the, I guess, like the subdivision approvals and some of the planning approvals and those things, which are small costs, but can help as part of the partnership of moving it forward. So there's different ways to cut the cookie, but I wouldn't see the municipality being the one getting involved. And in fact, the developer probably wouldn't want you involved in that level of development. They'd be quite happy to say, let's do an agreement. In terms of the agreement from the council's point of view, is this is the product we need in our community. We're trying to get attainable housing, and this is what we'll bring to the table. And I think that makes it more inviting for your developer. Does that help?
May I follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and from a transparency perspective, let's imagine, and certainly this doesn't exist, that there was a cynical citizen out there that said, well, geez, who's getting something out of this? I guess the trade-off you could explain is that, well, the town is getting more housing, which is of course beneficial for the town. If you did look at a solution being a long-term lease, then you're deferring the cost of the land to make it more desirable for a developer to get in there quicker, to do the development and make something happen. Is that an accurate way to look at it?
Absolutely. You could do it saying, look, it's a long-term lease rather than a front-up cost on the land of forking out whatever it might be. You're paying a lease, whatever that arrangement. And a lot of municipalities, like I mentioned in Edmonton here, they've done a land swap or whatever for $1 or $10 or something, whatever that might be. It's not really for revenue, but what you do is you hold the land ownership so that you maintain that attainability perspective of housing. Because here's the other risk is you give the land and it goes to someone who buys into it, who has money for more, but then they capitalize on that attainable housing. So it no longer becomes attainable housing. But if you have the lease, you have some control to make sure that future tenants and owners maintains the integrity of what your objective was.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Kuhn. Any other questions, Council? And seeing none, I will say thank you very much, Nick, for your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. You don't need me to stay on, or would you like me to stay on for anything? No?
Nick, I would certainly appreciate it if you stayed for our action item on the charrette.
Okay.
All right, so moving on to our action items. Our first action item is Bhutan Avenue Design Charrette Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report is before Council tonight for discussion related to the delegation that we just received on the design charrette that took place on the town-owned property at Bhutan Ave and Drunan Way. Previously, Council received a due diligence report on the suitability of the lands for residential development, as well as the geotechnical findings. The design charrette process was undertaken earlier this year, which sought collaboration with the community through an engagement process that provided insight into the future uses and needs for this parcel. The result, as Council's heard tonight during the presentation from P3, Mr. Price, is a mixed development, including various residential housing types as well as commercial space. So I won't restate much of what Mr. Price has already presented and discussed during this presentation. And in a moment, I'll invite Mr. Vanna to highlight anything further in this report for Council's benefit. But really the report focuses on the next steps on this development, which includes moving on some quick wins through phase 1 and 2, such as further analysis on the servicing of the land, to which $150,000 is slated to be included in the 2021 budget to finance that. Council, through the report generated by the process, has options to consider at this stage of the development, and the recommended action tonight is to proceed with option 3, collaborative partnership, as that's the favorable path forward in achieving affordable and attainable housing for this parcel. In working with partners on option 3 as well, there is a greater chance, as Mr. Price stated, of funding success through grant opportunities as well. At this time, I'll invite Mr. Vanna to touch on anything further in the report, and then we would be happy to receive any council questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just in terms of, I have nothing further to add, but certainly happy to answer any questions. In reviewing the various options, certainly we looked at the pros and cons and evaluated that, and certainly option 3 is a place to start.
Thank you, Mr. Vanna. Council questions? Councillor Wong.
Yes, I'm just curious about next steps. There had been a reference to a lot of work that needs to be done. What would be the next steps that council would see or that the public would see?
And CA also.
Thanks. I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Vanna to fill in any gaps. So council will see this come forward through a variety of the next steps, including any input that's required to proceed with agreements on the collaborative approach, and as well approval in accessing any grant funds. Often it's a requirement of a grant application to have council approval. So the council will be checked in with along the way. As far as the future steps, the $150,000 in the budget for the servicing analysis and some further work on that parcel will be coming forward in the next few weeks. Further to that, Mr. Vanna, if there's anything you want to touch on.
Or maybe to speak specifically to it, I mean, later on in the agenda, council will see that we're bringing forward the redistricting for the direct control. So what that does is provide a reflection of certainty in terms of this is what the design charrette came up with, and this is how it looks on paper when you look at the districting for it. The other things that we're doing, obviously, we put some money aside in the 2021 budget to look at the servicing for the area A, or the area 1 or the phase 1 lot. And in terms of funding, we also are pursuing opportunities where we may be able to find some funding to do the detailed engineering design for the whole site. And certainly we are in discussions with various people on looking at opportunities for partnership.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, I guess my question is for anyone in administration. Why would we not seek grants for the initial $150,000 development?
I'll defer to Mr. Vanna.
Mr. Vanna?
Sure, Madam Chair, to answer that question, we put it in there. We put it in the budget as a placeholder. So certainly it was there. We need to bring forward the budget for council's consideration, but that doesn't stop us from seeking out the grants to do the larger engineering. So the grants that we're trying to pursue through CMHC are really looking at the design of the whole site. And so we feel fairly confident that we should be able to access money to do the actual detailed engineering design. That doesn't include money to actually do the construction. So CMHC does have a program whereby they will give organizations and municipalities dollars at very low interest to do that. So I mean that's an option. So either you're going to borrow the money or you're going to put the money aside to do the actual construction of it. So all we've done is simply say we want to cover our hedge or hedge our bet in the upcoming year and make sure that we actually have some money set aside. And so that's really why we've done that.
Yeah, and I guess as a follow-up, and again, Mr. Vanna or CAO, along those same lines, in looking, if it was the will of council to move forward with option 3 and to seek those development partnerships, couldn't the initial $150,000 to service the area come in the form of creating a partnership and lease agreement with the developer? It's just it comes earlier rather than later?
The 150 that's proposed in council's 2021 budget is really capital dollars. So to prepare an agreement, there would be some administrative costs for that, and there'd be some consulting costs for that. So that's sort of an aside thing that doesn't, the timing here is fairly flexible. I mean, you're looking for partners all the time, and you're looking for opportunities where you could reach some, an agreement with various different kinds of partners. So that the two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but certainly one is capital and we need to look for operating.
Sorry if I made it to
Yes,
council,
sir.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just think one of the things that I want to make sure that we do our diligence on is looking at all potential options outside of just initially going to budget for the sake of looking forward towards the development. I love the work that's been done so far. I really do appreciate the charrette, the work that administration and Nick have put into presenting the report. And I think there's a lot of potential there. However, before jumping on the 150,000 right into the capital budget, although I understand the request, I think there's some opportunities to be sought out with the development community and or grants before we jump on board that right away. That's just, again, sort of my initial feelings in going through the report and where we sit right now. Just leave that open to council because I need to hear what you think too.
Mr. Vanna?
Madam Chair, I wouldn't want to get hung up on the $150,000. That is totally separate from what you're dealing with at the moment. That'll be dealt with as part of budget and part of the budget deliberations. And so it'll be totally up to council and when we get into that process.
Thank you, sir. I have a question. CA Wilson. So this action item right now, do we need to make a decision or we're asked to make a decision on this action item so we can pursue grants? That has nothing to do with action item 3 with the land amendment. Is that correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So correct. They're related, but the decision or the direction that we're seeking tonight is to pursue the option 3 and start working with finding the collaborative partnerships in order to move this forward, and as well to seek out those other grant opportunities. And as Mr. Van has indicated, we're already having some of those conversations, but before we get too far down that road, we want to make sure that we have council's understanding and approval to move in that direction.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, I'd like to see consensus that committee recommends to council that the town pursue option 3 as the preferred approach, a collaborative partnership approach in the development of the Bhutan Avenue lands with other organizations and developers, and collaboratively seek other sources of grant funding to provide affordable housing through a phased approach. And then Madam Chair, if I could speak to that.
Yes, sir.
Honestly, I think I appreciate this a lot because this has been a long time coming. This has been an issue that was on council's agenda since I first became a councillor in 2012. But it ties in really well to a number of different problems and issues that we've seen people advocate for. One of the things we've talked about is essentially a revitalization approach when it comes to the valley, businesses, seniors, communities, seniors living, seniors villages. I really do think that over the long term that the charrette sort of shows us a good plan to deal with a number of those issues. That being said, this is not something that the town of Hinton can afford to engage in on its own as a developer solely. I don't think we have the capital, and I don't think we can afford taking that kind of risk at this point in time. That being said, we can mitigate a lot of that by tapping the potential expertise of other partners and other developers who may be involved in something like this. But again, it's presented to us in a way that's very scaled and very measured, in that I don't think we're risking too much at any one point in time. And if things don't work out, of course, we can simply not proceed to move forward. It's lands that we control, and I think that's puts all of the control on our end of things. But I do think that there's an onus on us to try and improve seniors living, especially in this area of town. And with the development that's happening at Pine Valley right now, I think this is a perfect opportunity to go hand in hand with that and really create a small community, not so small community for our seniors that we can be proud of, so that we're not seeing this flow of seniors outside of Hinton. So for all those reasons, that's why I put this forward. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson.
If this were to pass, when would this come to council?
Sorry, go ahead.
In the preparation of this report, administration is prepared to bring this to the next regular, which is next week. So it's on the agenda as tentative to come on.
Thank you. I was almost hoping it'd be December 1st, and I may consider making that amendment. I'm just so curious to see what happens with budget, and if it looks clear that we're going to be really struggling for budget, that actually might affect the decision that I would be interested in making. I don't know what budget's going to look like, and it could make more financial sense to potentially just sell the lands and divest ourselves because we may need the money, or also might be clear that 150 is a make it or break it, which again, this doesn't necessarily change that motion, but I don't know that one can't happen without the other, but I'm curious.
Thank you, sir. Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Councillor Nelson, thanks for bringing that up because I share your same concerns. Again, a big issue that we've certainly, at least I've heard from the public in the last little while, is making sure that we're appropriately seeking out other sources of funding rather than initially the public purse right off the hop. And I think this is a good example of that. We have some tremendous opportunities, but I really think it's up to the town to also look for some potential streams of revenue to fund the project outside of just running the budget initially. And I think if we can do the initial work out of the gate to develop the trust in terms of transparency for the community, that's going to actually buy us some public credit in terms of moving the project forward. That's why I would argue the initial movement has got to demonstrate that we've got some originality and out of the box thinking in propelling the project forward without just run into the budget right away. And to speak directly to Councilor Nelson's concerns, I don't know if this shows up on the budget as a $150,000 line item, and it hasn't been proven to me that we as an organization have done our best seeking either partnership funding or other sources of revenue, that I would support it on the budget at this point in time. Because again, I think we have to do our diligence, we have to do our work first, because we're protecting the public purse. And so, Councilor Nelson, that's to speak to your concerns and how I feel on it. And if at that point it's not feasible, we could always revisit it, or we could always go back and change our approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McGowan. So, CEO, you had said that right now we are seeking grants right now. If we approve this, we will, I don't know, get more momentum in getting grants. How long does it take from when you put in for a grant to hear it receive a grant?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To answer that question, it does vary. To put in for a grant, it can take months before you hear back whether you're successful or not. Just to provide a little bit of clarity to council, moving ahead with this motion does not paint council into a corner as far as the budget process. Administration hears the the will of council and looking seriously at grants for that 150 as well. This is a capital line item that would be included in the budget, and as well the approach that administration took when considering including that was to fund council's strategic plan, to take a look at some strategic priorities and make sure that we had some money available in case grant opportunities or anything else, just so that our hands aren't tied moving into 2021, to show some real movement on some of those strategic plan initiatives.
So thank you very much. I just have to say in response to what you're saying, Councilor McGowan, by doing nothing, we will stay right where we are. My only concern is when this conversation started years ago, my memory says it was all about senior housing or housing for people over 50, over 60. To kind of stop the flow of these people leaving, all right? The phase one talks about the 7 tiny homes. I've yet to meet a senior who wants to live in a tiny home. And these tiny homes are 600 to 800 square feet. They don't have a garage. Seniors don't want to be shoveling snow off their car. So, and I know they did speak to this, 2021 to 2024, we're going to do the 7 little homes. And then 24 or 25, we're going to start on the duplexes for the seniors. We're not locked into that. I don't believe. We can maybe do some switching around, I would hope. But I just want to say I do support this motion. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I think one of the benefits of engaging in partnerships with a developer is that we can tap the experience of somebody who's done this someplace else, right? Who has experience. And Nick touched on it very clearly, and that was exactly the concern I heard a number of years ago, was the price point of $330,000 or $340,000. That's where seniors were like, nope. If I want, if my carport and my walk up is going to cost me $340,000, I just can't do it. That's more important than anything else. So if there's another solution to look at and the developer has experience in sort of solving that, great. As the developer, we can work with you to make it more feasible to do this. It's a little bit of an incentive to provide that housing, but it's not on such a grand scale that it's going to cost us potentially, right? And then that would be at least in moving down and making agreements in the future. That would be my mentality, is trying to mitigate risk to the town, but also providing an opportunity for something to be successful. So like you, I think it's important to give it that chance and see what we can grow.
Thank you, sir. So council, yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be in support of this motion. I do have some reservations. I wouldn't more than likely accept a $150,000 line item on the budget. I would encourage or try to challenge our administration to find matching grants right out. That would be the one part. I would maybe approve $75,000. I do hear Councillor Nelson's concern. I wouldn't be against waiting until December 1st, but I have no problem having this conversation on November 3rd and see if you want to defer it. these lands have been vacant for a very long time. I feel that selling the lands and having no partnership with it is going to just really end up having the same thing we had before, which was no development on those lands. So I have no problem looking at what we can get from partnering up with other players to make sure that some developments happen. So I do support this. I'm not against waiting till December 1st if that's the will of council, if there's any appetite for that. And yeah, those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Councilor McGowan.
And I think this question is for either Nick or for administration. So if we had a developer who came in and they said, you know what, we understand you guys, your phase one is tiny homes, but really where I think my money's at is this 4-story development where I can get a lot of units in, a lot of doors in, and I can make some money fairly quickly. Do we have the flexibility to jump ahead to that phase in order to accommodate that business plan, in order to roll that out, you know, on an enhanced timeline?
I'll defer to Mr. Bennett.
Would you like me to reply? Is it okay to speak to that? Can you hear me? Yep. The key on that will be you wouldn't be able to put it in at the moment because your downstream doesn't have capacity. So you got to deal with that downstream issue of your Santa and your storm. And that's, I don't know what the cost is, but when it deals with infrastructure, it's probably a bigger cost. So to jump in, that's why we've tried to go for the easy wins to begin with. So while if they're really adamant to go in, but you need to really understand what are the upgrades that are needed to that infrastructure and what is the cost. And that's one of the key things that needs to happen following this, to really understand what is the cost upgrade. Now, my understanding from the engineers, that's not just related to this development, it's an existing problem. So it's something that needs to be done anyway. But you need to go and find out, well, what is the cost to do that and what does it mean? So if you went in today with a developer who wanted to put a multi-story in, there's not the capacity in the system to accommodate it and you'd need to do the upgrades. And I can bet you bottom dollar that the developer will say, well, I'm not going to do those because then the cost of the housing is going to go up substantially. That's probably beyond the market. So you got to look at that to find out exactly what that cost of the downstream aspect is. What we've identified is what we call quick wins, because there is capacity in the system for really the first 2 phases of the development. Does that answer your question? So if we had the infrastructure upgraded, then that would not be an issue, and you could if someone came in, yes, you could go do it. But until that infrastructure is done, it won't happen.
Good. Councilor McGowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nick. Councilor Wong.
Thank you. I'll be speaking in support of this. I think it's the option that provides us the greatest flexibility and most likely outcome of attainability. And that's really what we got into this for at the beginning. So, and as far as timing, I don't want us to mix up a budget discussion with this project discussion. I think we need to get this before us as soon as possible so we can show some concrete progress on a project we've been waiting for a long time, and we can deal with budget considerations when budget comes before us. Administration has already assured us that they're going to be trying to secure some additional funding through grants and partnerships, and I am grateful that they're going to be taking that effort, and I trust that they'll do everything they can. In the meantime, let's get this before us as soon as possible, and show the community we're serious about getting this started.
Thank you, Councilor Haas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My team will support this. I was excited, when the charrette come before us and the opportunity there, and taking part in it. It was quite an exciting endeavor as well to have those conversations, and and there was lots more. I think yes, the seniors was part of the conversation, but I think this is a unique look at all different walks of life and age groups that could utilize this space as well, whether it be the tiny homes and can't afford a full-size home or something, but get a starter home, stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities here. It's a very unique area with a lot of some hurdles to run over, and I think that Nick and his team did a really good job of trying to air that out and make that area look really good and to developers and exciting for the community as well. So I too am in support of this. I think we need to start moving forward. We're not pulling the trigger on anything. We're just saying we want to keep moving ahead. And and budget-wise, I mean, I agree totally with the grants and everything like that. But you have to remember too that grants are never a guarantee. So at some point, we may be having that conversation of a bigger picture. But there again, we want to move this forward. I don't want to see these lands, sold and have nothing to show for it. So I'm excited about this project and I'm looking forward to its progress. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. So council, any more debate on this? I will call the question. The committee recommends to council that the town pursue option 3 as the preferred approach, a collaborative partnership approach in the development of the Bhutan Avenue lands with other organizations and developers, and collaboratively seek other sources of grant funding to provide affordable housing through a phased approach. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much. It's been
Thanks.
a privilege working with you all.
Mr. Haas.
Yeah, I'd also like to make the motion the committee accept the Bhutan Avenue design charrette for information as well, please.
Would you like to speak to that, sir?
I just think it was again, Nick and his team did, I think, a great job working with that land and with the community members and developers that are in our community to come up with I think a reasonable look at what could that area look like in the future for our community. Yeah, I think it was a great report, and I want to continue to see it used throughout this process.
Thank you, sir. And Councillor Haas. I'm sorry, we're doing.
Yeah, I'd like to end with the report. I'd like to just speak to the charrette process. I think it was really positive, and I can think of a couple other projects that the town in the past, if we had known or implemented a charrette, it would have been more successful, or it would have offered us a better chance for feedback and input from the community, which I think always increases the likelihood of success when we engage in those sorts of projects, or it gives us good feedback that we really could have used early on. So it was an excellent process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And council, any other discussion? I will call the question. The committee accept the Bhutan Avenue Design Charrette report for information. All those in favor? Thank you, Emma. Carried. We will move on to action item number 2, accessible transportation service delivery options. And CEO Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The accessible transportation service delivery is before council tonight to provide first and foremost transparency to the transfer of service in August this year, including the labor board application received from Unifor, as well as the resulting termination of the agreement by the Evergreens Foundation. This item has also been brought forward to council for direction on options for providing temporary or permanent service resumption. At this time, no understanding or change in circumstances have been achieved since this agreement was terminated. However, the report was created with optimism that there may be a solution that could be determined. More time is needed to see what's possible. At this time, the use of the service is minimal, as the majority of the use was to provide transportation to a local AHS program, which has been postponed due to the pandemic. Some of the pressures on resuming fully of the service. Option 1, as indicated in the report, is the temporary limited services for 2020 with the $8,000, which was slated to be provided to the Evergreens Foundation this year as part of the agreement. The town can provide limited service to the end of the year utilizing those funds. Option A for service into 2021 also utilizes the funds that were budgeted for through the agreement and provides up to 10 hours of service per week. Administration also commits to bringing a report to council prior to the end of quarter 1 to update on progress or propose a permanent solution moving forward. Administration is also prepared, as the previous report to turn the regular council report around after council's direction tonight to allow for a decision at the November 3rd meeting if possible, which would put the service back on the road following the meeting as far as option 1 is concerned. We do require council's approval before the service can move forward, even in a temporary fashion, into 2020, as council included in the transfer service decision, the elimination of accessible transportation as a town service area. Just want to make sure that we're covering everything we need to there. And as well, if anything is determined or more information is understood during budget for 2021, we will bring that information to council as soon as it's available. At this time, administration is happy to receive any questions that council might have. I've got Ms. Bouchard and Ms. Altrani joining us tonight to assist in answering any questions.
Thank you, CEO. Council, any questions? And Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to make the direction that committee recommend council implement option number 1 for the remainder of 2020 and option A for 2021 as presented to ensure temporary limited accessible transportation services are made available and to allow time for an agreement with an external party for the delivery of these services to be reestablished and executed. If I can speak briefly to it, this is something I believe in strongly, and most of the citizens I talked to believe in it strongly as well, and checked a lot of boxes, which was, maintaining, if not improving the service delivery, reducing the burden on taxpayers, and ultimately, at the time we made the first decision, I felt like it was the right decision, and I've received nothing but consistent feedback with that same approach from citizens, and I look forward to kind of hitting the reset button and moving forward again on this item. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Councilor McMillan.
Yeah, without getting into specifics, I'm disappointed. It's the town, and my hat's off to both Evergreens and the town for working together to try and find some easy wins for all parties. Essentially what we were talking about was reducing the cost to the town, enhancing the service through a partner organization where this is their specialty, is serving citizens who, would have these transportation needs, at a reduced cost to the taxpayer. Like, to me, that is a win-win-win. But certain decisions were made, and unfortunately we had to pull back from that. Like Councilor Nelson said, and I think it was a good way of putting it, that here's a good opportunity to hit reset. This is not a service that I am in any way, shape, or form, willing to sacrifice for our citizens. We will make sure our seniors and those people with mobility issues have this option available to them. Full stop, pardon the pun. And we're going to move forward in ensuring that we have an efficient organization to offer our citizens, because ultimately it's their tax dollar at work. And I think really what this is more about is about being willing to talk and come to the table in a collaborative and productive way. And I will stick by that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Haas.
Yeah, I'll be speaking in favor of this, and I too, the administration was tasked with a difficult, task that we put before them and come up with a great, look at that service and how we can continue the service and have those partnerships. And unfortunately, others, had other, trains of thought going around that. So, but I do look forward to what the future holds for, and look forward to new partnerships as well. So we'll keep the wheels running, and and figure out who's going to run those in the future. But I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. And Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to echo some of the comments previously said, this makes it loud and clear, I think, to our residents that there is no appetite ever to eliminate Freedom Express or their services. And this is just another step in the right direction to provide a service, but yet, as Councilor Nelson alluded to earlier, reset and look at best spending the taxpayers' money in different ways. And this one, you win some, you lose some sometimes. There's bumps in the roads. There's somewhat of a bump right now, but the service is still there. So I heard the same feedback as many councilors said. The majority of people, when explained, understood what administration put forward to council, what council ultimately supported. And I look forward to seeing what this looks like in 2021 and further after that. So
I'll be in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And council, any further discussion? I will call the question. That committee recommend council implement option number 1 for the remainder of 2020 and option A for 2021 as presented to ensure temporary limited accessibility transportation services are made available and to allow for an agreement with the external party for the delivery of these services to be reestablished and executed. All those in favor? And that was carried. Thank you. Council, we are moving on to action item number 3, and that is land use bylaw amendment number 1088-15. CAO Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council is receiving these amendments tonight for discussion and direction as they relate to the first item on the agenda, and a lot of context was provided in the delegation and in the discussion around that first report. Due to the design charrette and the pro forma and need to move to direct control district to allow for the preferred development of the land chamber is outlined in the Hinton Avenue design charrette final report. The recommended action for this item is that committee recommend council give land use bylaw 1088-15 first reading is presented to schedule a public hearing on December 1st, 2020 at 4 p.m. At this time, administration would be happy to receive council's questions.
Thank you, CAO. Councilor McGowan.
I'd like to move that committee recommend council give land use bylaw number 1088-15 first reading as presented, and then just quite briefly, if I may, Madam Chair, like this is just an important part of the process. We can't hear the rest of the public's concerns or any other concerns that haven't been brought to our attention until we go through the process of having a first reading and then of course the subsequent public hearing. So from a process perspective, this is important for us to do in order to see where this project lay.
Council, we have a motion. Any further discussion? I will call the question. That committee recommend council to give land use bylaw number 1088-15 first reading as presented. All those in favor? And that's carried. And Councilor Nelson.
The committee recommend council to schedule a public hearing on December 1st, 2020 at 4 p.m. in council chambers to hear public comments on bylaw 1088-15. Same as Councilor McGoon, this is a great way to more officially get feedback from citizens and maybe build some excitement around this project. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Councilor Waugh.
Yeah, just a question for admin as to how the public hearing will proceed in the time of COVID.
CAO Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's through to Councilor Waugh. So I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to take a look in council chambers lately, but the barriers that we have ordered are being installed. So by December 1st, 2020, all the additional health and safety measures to keep our public and our council and our administration safe should be in place, which would then open up council chambers to the public to attend the public hearing in public in the flash. So we're looking forward to moving in that direction. Everything's moving along well in order to achieve that. What we will put out is that members of the public that wish to speak during the public hearing, let Ms. Anderson know, similar to how we've been doing with Minute with Council, to I guess to sign up for that. So we have an understanding of how many people will be attending, and we can just make sure that we're putting the proper provisions in place around that. That will be communicated within the 2 weeks consecutive advertising in the local paper.
Thank you. And Councilor Nelson.
Just kind of following up on that, would citizens have an opportunity to respond to the public hearing virtually, in that although we may be comfortable with a small amount of people coming into our building, citizens may not be comfortable coming into this building, and I'd rather meet them where they are if possible.
And CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely, the council chambers has been had an upgrade through technology so that Zoom is also available in that room. Back there, so allowing residents to participate via Zoom is also an option.
Thank you.
So Zoom, in person, by mail, by email, lots of avenues to get your information. Thank you. Also, we have a motion. Any further discussion? I will call the question that committee recommend council schedule a public hearing on December 1st, 2020 at 4 p.m. in the council chambers to hear public comments on bylaw number 1088-15. All those in favor? That is carried.
Winter privilege, I just request a quick break.
Certainly, sir. Thank you, council. Welcome back. We're moving on to action item number 4, and that is our strategic plan and priorities update. CAO Olsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight is council's first look at the updated strategic plan, which was created through discussion and direction provided during a strategic planning session on October 3rd. It was led by Mr. Tim Duhamel. His team at Bloom have assisted in the development of this document as well. The version attached to the report is a built-out document that includes information on processes, best practice, core values, municipal challenges and opportunities, as well as 6 priority focus areas. The priority focus areas include economic growth, capital planning, attainable housing, good government, service delivery, and financial stability. Under each priority focus area, a goal statement and broad objectives are included. On the administrative side, through this document, after council approves an updated strategic plan, a corporate plan will be developed to create measurable actions to advance priorities and goals of the plan, and this is expected to be developed alongside budget 2021 and will be brought to council in early 2021 for looking for approval. With the strategic and corporate planning process in place, communicating updates on progress will be more frequent and straightforward. Changing and improving town processes and practices does take time, and for this year, depending on the discussion tonight and moving forward, may be slightly out of sync. Strategic planning, corporate plan, and budget to fund corporate plan and strategic plan. So that might be a little bit out of sync this year and even into next year slightly, but these wrinkles will continue to be ironed out, addressed, or altered to make sure it's making sense to everybody involved. Council tonight will no doubt have some suggestions, questions, and comments on what has been included in this document. Admin is taking detailed notes to ensure that any amendments are captured prior to council receiving the strategic plan at a regular council meeting or further discussion at a standing committee meeting. This time, I'll do my best to answer council's questions.
Thank you, CAO. Council, Councilor McGowan.
First of all, thanks for presenting what we have of the plan right now. I think the biggest concern for citizens that I'm interfacing with is, of course, the corporate plan. Knowing the specific deliverables over the next X number of months, and then, of course, I think that's also important to administration and council, because what it allows us to do is work backwards from certain due dates and say, well, these are the targets we need to hit, and this is what you can expect your agenda to look like for the next, X number of months. So my concern, though, comes from hearing that we're going to be looking at corporate plan in the new year. For myself, I think there's a bit of a debate over the chicken and the egg approach. I think if we see that corporate plan before us earlier, that allows us a little bit more clarity in approving the budget, right? If we can see on paper, well, look, this is what we're looking to achieve. And in order to achieve that, here's your budget. You need to approve these particular line items in such a fashion. I guess if admin wants to speak to that, that would help me.
And through to Councilor McGowan, so very good points around the process and the timing. Prior to our budget dates towards the end of November, Council will get updated service area dashboards from admin and a very short, straight to the point presentation from our division directors to talk about priorities for the next year. So some of those questions might be answered through that. So a detailed corporate plan isn't something that we've been utilizing at the town of Hinton, and this is a bit of a new process for us that we're establishing now. Looking into 2021 and bringing something that's being developed through discussion around the strategic plan. And I expect there will be substantial discussion about the priorities and as well, and then through budget. So marrying the two, and again, it's a little bit out of the order that they should be in, but we're working with the time that we have in order to get this done, considering that we're creating an entire new process.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion? And Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I'm really struggling with this. Prior to strat planning and even throughout the process, we spoke to the importance of knowing what the next year brings. And I was hoping for something far more brief and in many ways less visionary. We created a visionary document 3 years ago. We endeavored to update it last year, which never really came to fruition. And looking at changing entire processes right now, I don't know that I have issues with processes. I have issues with progress, I guess, and where we're going to. And to me, I think citizens are expecting us to give clear directions, not high overarching visions that we did already in our term. I think citizens want us to give some direct leadership and ensure that it's really measurable what we're doing and what we're implementing and where we're going. And so to me, I don't think this represents what citizens are looking for from me and from our council at this time. And I think I'll just leave it at that. It's a struggle because I appreciate a lot of this document. I just don't think it is what Hinton needs right now. Thank you.
I'm sorry, which one, Heather? Councillor McGowan.
Thank you. Yeah, and I certainly agree that what's been presented it's not bad. And in fact, it's quite positive as a guiding document. I think it's what we're not seeing at this point in time. And I don't even know if calling it a corporate plan is the right language for me. I know what citizens would appreciate if I could bring to them is literally that one pager that says, here is what the town of Hinton is going to do over the next 12 months. And these are the specific deliverables that you as a citizen can expect to see. And if we don't deliver on these, then then something's wrong, and we need to make sure that we're following up with the citizens to explain, this is what's going on. Or, yes, we're going to deliver on these items. That is what I think people want to see from a tangible perspective. So I do echo some of the same concerns that Councillor Nelson has thrown out there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't share the same concerns. The strategic plan is supposed to be a broad vision. I know we all focused on some of the things that we could get done in the next year. And I think the document for that is going to start having that laid out is in the budget. That's always where you see your priorities every year. With that said, I do understand that Councillor also understanding about being able to communicate concisely about what we hope to do in this year. Is that something that's going to be evident within the dashboards you're talking about being presented prior to budget? CEO Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through Councillor Watt. There will be some priorities included, similar to the framework that we used last year, where we looked at accomplishments for the year prior, and then as well looking forward to the next year. It will not be as detailed as the corporate plan would be. So even the one pager, it wouldn't have the individual actions necessarily spelled out in the way that is what other councillors are speaking about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haas.
Thank you. I don't necessarily agree with some of the comments. I think one of the things that I've heard a lot of the times is the focus on the citizens, and I really appreciate the quality of life portion of the strategic planning of what we're to do what are we doing in the business of delivering that quality of life. And I think ultimately that's what our citizens are looking for. And I think this document does a really good job of it. I think too, the focus areas is everything that we've talked about, but it's just more succinct to me. I mean, when I read this document versus our first one when we did, I think this particular one showed a lot more excitement and ingenuity, and more focuses on not just specifics. I think there was more specifics in the other one, but I think, these are the things, whether it's economic growth, we've spoken on that. We wanted the capital planning. I'm really excited about also too the talk about taxes and what are we looking for in the future. So there's some consistency. Their citizens are prepared with what is our taxes going to look at in the next little while and come up with that plan. Tonight was the conversation about attainable housing. So I think this was a really good, I felt, document. It was an easy read. It was, I think, exactly what our citizens have been striving for and looking for as a council. And I think it puts us on track. And I don't think it hits the reset button. I think it drives us a little bit more succinctly this way. And it also, has a better of what our role and then administrative taking it back and in our decision making when it comes to budget. So I really enjoyed this document. I like the process of it, of building it. I think it was a lot more exciting and interacting than we've experienced before. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilor McGowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think back to our workshop where we sat down and we outlined, what are our expectations for the process? What did we want to see? And I seem to remember everyone speaking to, or most of us speaking to the fact that as a takeaway, they wanted to see deliverables, right, as part of that process. And I hear from administration we're going to see that, and I certainly don't begrudge that. But as a councillor, if you were to ask me my individual opinion, I would be to say part of this strategic plan for the remainder of this council's term needs to include very clear deliverables that the citizens of Hinton can expect, because that was something we talked about. And with the report I see before me, that's not in there. And for myself, waiting until the new year, until after we've started the budget deliberations, again, it comes back to that chicken and egg approach. I don't think we can craft a budget unless we have those deliverables in front of us, knowing what we're crafting a budget for. So for myself, it's good. All of this is important, but it's lacking that necessary component that that many of us spoke to in the workshop, of having clear deliverables on a clear timeline. So for myself, I need to see that in order to support this. Otherwise, I think transparently, it is completely within a citizen's right to say to me, what are you going to do over the next 12 months? In this case, 12 months. What are you going to do over the next 11 or 12 months? What's your job? Well, I've given you these strategic goals. Okay, well, when am I going to see the specifics? Well, not until the new year. So you're really not going to start acting on that until February, March, but you've already determined your budget at that point, or you're coming close to determining the budget. You know what I mean? I think the earlier we have those deliverables, that gives us better tools to form the budget with. We're buying ourselves time at the front end rather than the back end. So again, this is just where I see it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I struggled quite a bit going through this. There's 43 broad objectives that are fairly long-winded. But regardless, putting that aside, the other part of the equation is the corporate plan. So I look forward to that, but there are a few things in here that are, I think, were a big part of our conversation that are not overly explicit. One is I would like to see something that states that we will strive to be, for example, in the 90th percentile when it comes to competitive grants within the Yellowhead region or whatever. We talked about specific details of that nature. We understand it's going to be high level when it comes to a strat plan, but we wanted to narrow the focus, and this is very similar to other ones. So I want to stay positive and move forward. We have an opportunity tonight to change this a bit, to tweak it. And one of the consensus I'd like to achieve is to direct administration to bring back specific grant objectives within this. I'd have to read it again, but I don't think the word grant is within the whole document of the objectives 1 through 6. That's unfortunate. To me, that is a huge part of what our council talked about, is there's a limited amount of streams to collect funds, but yet the word grant, and like I said, I'd be remiss if it's in there, but I don't recall seeing it. And we need to make that one focus. The other one is, again, they're high-level statements, and I do echo some of the comments. One of the things we talked about was bringing diversity, whether it's in industry and commercial lands, options to our community. When I read the first part, the economic growth, I don't really see that. I see a lot of high-level statements, but what I think people want to see is that we will look to diversify our economy and bring light and heavy industrial zones within the boundaries of Hinton or outside of them, just outside, or work with partnerships. It's still lacking some. So I wanted to share my thoughts publicly that I feel this is an improvement to prior, but it's still too close. And I'm a bit remiss that we don't have the corporate plan side by side with it to sort of fill in those blanks. So I don't want to sound too negative, but to me, I think we have an opportunity either tonight or another day to change this, because as it is right now, I don't overly like this strat plan. And honestly, I wouldn't support it the way it is exactly today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Watt.
Yeah, there's been some concerns expressed by council. I just wanted to provide the administration the opportunity to kind of comment. If there was the departmental plans put side by side with the strategic plan, would some of these concerns be addressed? Would some of these more immediate structured goals be evident?
CEO.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councillor Well. I think so. The purpose of the corporate plan is to create actions around the objectives and the goals that council has approved through their strategic plan. Previous strategic plans have mixed those things, so you would have concrete actions included with your broad objectives, and that made it difficult to measure progress and to come back and show council where movement is occurring. So looking at the broad objectives and ensuring that though that is the direction you would like administration to head in, administration creates a corporate plan. It's not an extensive process, but it's basically the actions that stem from how we are going to achieve those priorities for council, how we are going to put things in place and move in that direction to show council and the community some outcomes, I guess, out of the strategic plan. So again, the process it's a little out of sync and it's not ideal. We're starting it a little bit late in the year, but it is a process that I think is important to administration and to council moving forward to figure out. I think it'll make communication on progress a lot easier and a lot more timely, and as well will give council and the community that list of actions for the year that administration will be bringing forward. It helps with our agenda planning and performance management for different areas and individuals as well. It's a whole system that needs to be built.
Thank you.
And just to follow up, and it all starts with the adoption of the strategic plan as first step.
It does, but it is also important that council agrees with what's in the plan. So feedback and discussion to make adjustments or to make sure that it's feeling comfortable and feeling right to council is very important.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to speak to the CEO's last point, in order to make it feel comfortable for everyone, and I'm just thinking a little bit more globally in terms of our citizens, I think a good strategic plan is going to have something for everyone. The information that we see in here, I think it's really good from a policy perspective, from a governance perspective. What it's lacking is a little bit of empathy towards the boots on the ground citizen approach. Again, I think about Joe and Jane on the street. If they're going to ask a councillor or the town of Hinton, what are you doing for me, right? What are you about to do for my tax dollars? I don't see that in here. And honestly, I'd challenge that. I'd say, you know, I look at this plan, I see a lot of intellectual language and I can see the value in that. But as a taxpayer, I want to know, what are you going to do for me? And that is an answer. And I think they're both important. They both have a place. And I think a well-rounded strategic plan will have both of those presented at the same time. And that was something that I iterated in the workshop. So that's sort of what I expect when I come to the work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I think there's, so I look at the world right now and a lot of investment is talking about ESGs, environmental, social, and governance. This document is a governance document, but it doesn't hit anything socially for the community, and it doesn't hit anything environmental for the community. And that's where our community sustainability plan spoke a lot about environment and social. You know, if we went ahead with this, I would say most of FCSS would likely become a really low priority, and we would spend a lot more time just doing asset management, because it's the social portion of what we do for the community is not part of this. So I think we talked a little bit about the CSP and during our strat plan, but until we know what we're doing with the CSP, which since day one we said we were going to update it, I think we are completely missing two portions of the community, and which makes this to me feel very much like a corporate document rather than a community document. And that's the other thing I struggle with. If alongside we want to commit to what we're doing with the CSP or recommit again with some more firm timelines and resources behind it, then I could be more likely to support it. But I just don't think it's representing the community as much as it should. I think it's representing what the municipality is looking to do, which you know, the municipality is part of the community, not the other way around. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. I will speak right now. So CAO, do you think this might be a really good opportunity for council to pause and just give all their ideas to administration? You know, because you've heard a lot tonight, you know, what is missing, what they would like to see. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just clarification on what you mean by that, I guess.
Well,
to pause and
yeah.
go around the table, or pause and bring this back at a future meeting after some additional feedbacks we've received.
Yes, so being chair, I can't make the motion, but I'm seeing that one of your options is, option 2 is to come back with amendments. Option 3 is to come back to another standing committee meeting. And maybe, you know, if I'm not supposed to be doing this, you guys, you tell me, okay? Please. So if option 3 is to bring it back to another standing committee meeting, but prior to doing that, you are requesting all of the information that you feel is missing from that strat plan that's been presented. Does that sound good?
That's absolutely an option for council.
So, council, we do not have a motion on the floor. Yes, sir.
My question, I guess for administration is, if it was the will of council, and if you had enough clear direction tonight, because I don't know in your position if you had, because I think we've all iterated, you know, some different parts of maybe a whole. What sort of time frame would be good for administration to bring this back to a standing committee? How much time do you think you might need?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess without knowing the full scope of feedback and change that council would be expecting, it's a little bit difficult to answer. So if we're looking to change or improve upon the priority focus areas to be more reflective of the community, or if we're looking to add appendix items that are maybe more of that corporate plan flavor that includes more action items as an attachment to this document. There's varying degrees of timeline, I suppose. We're also preparing for budget as well. This goes hand in hand, and we're working on our own timeline, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So depending on the scope of the, it could be a couple of weeks, but we would prioritize it alongside budget to ensure that council has a look at it as well.
Are you good, sir?
Well, Madam Chair, if unless anybody else has another question, I'd be willing to take a crack at a direction, and then see where the support lies or see how council feels. But I do just want to give a second to see if council has any questions or anything else before I do. Then I would like to move that committee recommend.
Is that one of the options?
Let me see here. I do have to check the wording. Yes, it would be 3. But I think we probably, for administration and council, want to put a date on that. So I would like to see consensus that committee recommend council bring the Town of Hinton Strategic Plan 2020-2024 to the standing committee meeting of, I guess that would put it at November 10th for further discussion. And I just want to make sure my date's right, that from my calendar that's showing standing, I think I'm right there, is that correct? Okay, thank you. And I apologize, it's just my iPhone's confused on two different calendars. And then, Madam Chair, if I can just speak to it, but only from my own perspective, I think what that allows us some time to do is provide administration with our own individual feedback, if anything hasn't been captured already in our discussions. Give administration a little bit of a chance to put their heads together and see how they want to potentially make changes or modify that document and bring it back to standing committee for a discussion. Again, my high level concern in putting this forward really does center around that boots on the ground approach. As a citizen of Hinton, in this document, what do I see that I can hang my hat on? And that's deliverables. And that is the one thing that I talked about in the workshop that I would need to see in the strat plan. And understanding what exists, I think is good. We can tweak it, but we are missing that key element for myself. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, go ahead, Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one note on the date, November 10th. There are a number of items that are slated to come forward on that date, including the civic agencies presentations and potentially the service area dashboards. So it's definitely something that we can work towards. It just may be a long meeting.
Thank you. One thing I do want to add here is your motion is requesting that this strategic plan comes back to us. But should it include, with the inclusion of council's recommendations? We just don't want the same thing coming back. We want.
If I may?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm assuming that was a direct question, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're going to have to rely on the feedback of council and see really, I mean, if the majority of council gives feedback to administration saying that we would like to see some measure of a dashboard or of a plan laying out what the next 11 months looks like in terms of, actionable items, then I would say that administration is going to have to use their judgment in hearing that. If only one of us brings that forward, if I'm the only one bringing that concern forward, that's not the majority. And I'm assuming administration will sort of take that into account and identify that in their report. Again, unless we're willing to sit down and hammer on a line by line item right now, what we want an updated report to look like, which, I mean, we could. If administration doesn't have clear consensus, we can do that. I'm open to hearing that. So it's part of the discussion right now, I guess.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess two things. One, and if it doesn't need to be in there, that's fine, but I was thinking, should it say to bring an amended Town of Hinton strategic plan?
Yeah.
But secondly, I guess my question to council is, are we okay with 43 broad objectives? And I'm asking that as like, I'd rather give some joint consensus or direction here today in a public forum where we have a conversation about what we, all six of us who are present, think collectively. Otherwise, it might be a little bit difficult for administration to take conflicting thoughts. So I'd like to iron out. And to me, I would like for this to come back with much less broad objectives. I think 43 is just too much. So those are my thoughts. If we had 20 broad objectives, and I'd like for them to be more specific and concise. That was my expectation. That would be a good start. And if we can present the public something that's more focused and narrow on a strategic plan, giving that it obviously has to be to some extent high level, I'd be more comfortable, at least starting with that. Thanks.
Councilor McGowan?
Well, and I think then another possible option, and I could certainly withdraw my direction on the table if council wanted it, was we also could look at the option of setting a special meeting for the purposes of working with the document, providing our input between now and the next standing committee or the next regular council even, to try and create some amendments which could be brought forward. But I think maybe that would probably be best served as a meeting on its own. It does mean a little bit more work on our part, but I think that's why we have the jobs, to make those sorts of decisions and do the footwork. And I'm okay with that.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to build off of Councillor McGoon's comments, looking at the timeframe for November 10th, in order for administration to receive the feedback from council and turn it over through an amended strategic plan and bring it forward, it needs to be that those amendments would need to be completed by midweek next week. So just making council aware of that timeframe and kind of the constraint there, in order for it to be approved and put into the agenda package for next Friday.
Councillor McGoon?
Well, we haven't set the agenda yet until tomorrow for next week. How does council feel about, and I'd just like to hear opinions about a special meeting following regular council on Tuesday, or another special meeting next week or this week?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to address that and address your more direct question. I personally have no desire to actually engage further. We spent 8 hours, a full day with a facilitator to get to this point. And to me, it's missed the mark. And I don't want to spend a whole bunch more time trying to change something that I don't think we're going to get there in 2 hours or 3 hours. I think where maybe we'll get there is during budget. That might, the concerns about 43 objectives, maybe we have a clear idea of what our objectives and deliverables are at the end of November. And if we want to circle back to our strategic plan and after budget and have a little bit better idea of what those deliverables are and almost have this be a transitional document into the next council, I would be fine with that. I also, unless we're having the discussion about the CSP and where we're going to hit environment and social as part of our strategic plan, it isn't a strategic plan, it's a corporate plan already. I personally have no significant desire in spending more meeting time in the middle of what I hope to be our best budget process ever. And I would rather have my focus be on really making sure we hit the budget right, because I think that's what accomplishes what our concerns around the strategic plan are. So that's where I stand on it. So I look forward to dealing with budget and hitting it there. Thank you.
Councillor Law?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would agree with Councillor Nelson in the sense that I don't know how much more time we should be spending on the strategic plan. But I disagree with Councillor Nelson about this missing the mark. This document is supposed to represent our discussions that day. And I think while there is some emphasis lost on some nuances of it, there are a couple points that are missing. I think it's a pretty fair representation of what we discussed that day, and that was the job of this document. So if there are broader concerns about things that are missing, then that was something to address that day, I think. So I would, I think if councillors have specific issues, like if there's a couple items that they want dropped or they want emphasized, I think we need to discuss this now and move on, as opposed to trying to schedule another special meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor McGowan?
Yeah, and I do want to sort of tag off what Councillor Waugh had just said. Again, as much as I do also want to see the deliverable list, the stuff from the ground level that I think citizens would appreciate the most, I also think most of us spoke to the fact that having a vision that stretches beyond just this council was important. And I do believe that this document achieves that, which is why I've stressed over and over again that what we have in front of us is it's not bad. It's good, and I appreciate the work from both council and administration and our facilitator. This shouldn't be lost. I just want to stress that I do think that there's a critical piece lacking. So I respectfully disagree, Councillor Nelson, in saying that this misses the mark. I think the only way it misses the mark is that we're missing something else, a companion piece, if that's what you want to call it. You know, they're both important. This is important to the municipality and the government, but for our citizens and for transparency's sake, to hold us accountable to doing our jobs, there's also the deliverables piece. And I think that needs to come sooner rather than later. So if this motion right now, coming back to it, gives administration a chance to say, okay, look, we've heard from council that this communications piece on deliverables is important as part of this document. If it gets me that, then great, I'm going to continue to support this. Now, administration, if this doesn't give you enough time to give me that, then I need a different date. Otherwise, I have to continue forward with this. But I just, again, it's my motion, I guess the direction I chose to put forward at this point. Does this give administration enough time to include something like that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It would be difficult to achieve, I would say. There's an additional standing committee meeting on November 17th, extending the time frame to the 17th to have our next look at it would give a bit more time.
Okay, Madam Chair, then what I'd like to do is I'd like to amend my own date from the 10th to the 17th.
Okay,
Because again, that matches the original intention of the direction that was put on the table. And I will stand by the direction.
thank you, sir. I just have to say the one concern I have with this is we have a ton of objectives, but not to how we're gonna meet the objectives. And that to me is a whole new day of conversation. This is what we want to do, but how do we get there? Go ahead, sir.
Well, and if I may, that was the whole point of the deliverables. When we sat down in that workshop, I know many of us touched on that same point in saying that, you know, these are high level objectives, but what's important is the specific ground level things that we're gonna see. How do we achieve, you know, increased, here, just picking one from housing, right? If we want to expand housing choice in Hinton, how are we gonna get there? And I think what the citizens deserve to see in a strategic plan is the actual actionable goal. And you know, I think back to when we used to have the dashboards, when consistently you were sort of questioning administration, where does this fit on the dashboard? How come we haven't met the specific date? You know, because citizens are asking me about that. I think that demonstrates that interest. And it demonstrates to people that we're moving the actual strategic plan forward. You know, and the more of those that we're hitting, the more we can demonstrate to the public that we are accomplishing the strategic plan, right? Some of these goals without specific deliverables early on, it's very hard to say, how do you measure success? I need to see the outcomes, right? If, you know, equating it back to my business, when we as teachers have to develop professional growth plans every year, part of that professional growth plan is having specific measured objectives that are smart, specific SMART goals. You know, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable? Is it realistic? Is it timely? If I can't see that, it's a really nice high level goal that doesn't mean anything. And right now we've got these really good goals. These are solid goals and noble goals, but they are lacking the ground level approach where I can measure them, you know, specifically. And I understand administration saying that they're going to bring that to us. But as a counselor, what I'm saying is coming out of that workshop, I expected to see them now, and I would like to see them sooner rather than later.
Thank you, sir. And I know exactly what you're saying because I'm seeing right now under economic growth, pursue initiatives and actions that will result in new residential development and growth. Well, exactly how are we going to do that? My biggest fear as a citizen is going to come to me and say, what does this mean? How are you achieving this? And I haven't got a clue. So when I say we need a whole other day, I think we did need a whole other day to come up with how we're going to achieve all these objectives. So we do have a motion on the floor. Is there any more conversation on this? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess just for clarity, I know it was talked about a little bit earlier. this gives the latitude for council to give some feedback, and the strat plan that would be coming back on the 17th would be changed, potentially, there would be changes to it? Administration?
So again, depending on what feedback's provided by council, we would endeavor to create amendments to bring back something that is more focused and narrowed, reducing some of those broad objectives. It's difficult to reduce the broad objectives without knowing what areas council feels are overextended or maybe overexplained. It's difficult to put something forward that doesn't presume what council is looking for. What I have heard loud and clear is that council would like to see the corporate plan or elements of a corporate plan at the same time as reviewing the strategic plan next. That there's deliverables and action items that council would like to see. And I guess just coming back to the strategic planning session and the process that I think I assumed was understood, and I'm clearer now on the steps, I guess, and the maybe disconnect from what administration has been working under. So strategic plan coming forward, the broad objectives, the direction that it's headed, yes. Then the corporate plan with all of those action items that are measurable and can be updated to council and the community in a timely fashion. Looking forward to a process where when council receives, tightening up this process, but when council receives financial updates, they get an update to their strategic plan as well. These are some of the things that we're talking about on the administrative side to help this process succeed. Understanding and listening to council tonight, I can understand the need to have some action items when you're speaking to people on the street and appreciate the feedback and the discussion tonight.
Councilor Hawes?
Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to review in our that day. You know, we didn't really talk about deliverables that day. I can't recall that. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I mean, we talked about overview stuff, but I don't recall. We might have talked about specific, like that we want to see deliverables, but what those deliverables are, I don't recall that part of the conversation. I guess maybe I'm wrong. So I see some hands fly up. So maybe, because I guess where I'm at is that how, I guess deliverable wise, how that would be part of this particular document if I don't recall that conversation. That's the only thing I'm thinking of. So, because I mean, I said something like that. I guess I'm assuming I'm hearing deliverables, but I haven't heard any examples of deliverables either. Like what is an example of a deliverable that somebody's got in mind, I guess, is where I'm at, you know, that would have got into this document, I guess. So.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. I just want to assure that this conversation is aligned with this motion that's on the floor.
And it kind of is, for me, if we can have that conversation tonight to give the administration something to consider, you know, moving forward, and I don't know, I guess that's where I'm at, is because we're going to send them back with, we say these deliverables, then we expect them to come up with the deliverables, but whether that's what the council wants as deliverables, you know, then we're going to go back to it again. So I guess that's where I'm at, is I don't want it to come back if there's nothing specific given to administration to bring back. So.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Lagoon.
Yeah, and just to speak to that, there were, I know for myself, a number of times where our facilitator had said, well, trust in the process. What we're going to do is we're going to deal with these high-level issues, which will then, you know, feed into specific things that you'll see on the agenda where administration is delivering on your strategic plan. Mm-hmm. And there, at least myself, and I know at least several other councillors had walked in and said, well, what I need to see is, you know, what items are we tackling over the next period of time so that the citizens, again, can hold us to account. You know, are you dealing with procedural bylaw? You know, if we're talking about governance as an example, council has expressed some concerns with procedural bylaw. You know, are you dealing with that? Is that on your agenda in the next 3 months? Well, if it's not, why not? Because you said it's a problem, you know, those sorts of things. So how does this strategic plan feed into our calendar over the next 11 months. And also, I think it does address the far-reaching plan really well. It does that well, right? I just don't think that it's, again, now only speaking for myself, that it doesn't address that immediate 11-month calendar that I think citizens deserve to see.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Wah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And speaking to what's up on the board, I'm willing to support it if we have some tangible amendments that the administration can take back and present to us. Otherwise, I'm in the same boat as Councillor Hawes. I'm not sure what we're hoping to achieve by pushing this down the road. As far as the expectations coming out of strat planning, I think the document we have before us is what I had envisioned as being the first step in that, that longer process where administration was going to take, it was going to feed into some administrative planning, it was going to feed into our budget. With that said, I acknowledge what some of the other councillors have said, and it would be nice to have maybe a top sheet with some, some quicker achievables that can be communicated to the public. I understand that, but as far as this document, as part of the new start, the new process, I think this, like I said, there's some items within it that I think could be emphasized a little differently, and I'm willing to entertain a discussion about those. But as far as the document itself, I've got no issues with it, and I trust administration down the road to reflect some of the urgency that we had on that day about some of the deliverables within the budget and the plans they're going to bring forward. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wah. Ms. Olson, on page 105 of 116, it talks about service delivery. So was it administration's, was administration under the understanding that here are the objectives and administration would break them down into how we would deliver them? So, and I know the first year we did this, council was part of that in 2017. We did the objectives, we broke it down, so when would we hear what steps are going to be taken to deliver?
Yes. So that would come with the corporate plan. So the broad objectives, the actions that support the broad objectives would come through the corporate plan. This is a process that a lot of other communities follow. They do their strategic plan, they have the accompanying document that council sees and can weigh in on what's included in those action items and ultimately endorse for administration to move forward in achieving those. We're moving those broad objectives forward through those specific actions.
My concern is we've got a year left. We've got a year left to get some work done, and that year is going to go by really, really quick. And that's concerning to me. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, and just to speak to it as well, I think when we look at these broad objectives, the more we have specificity early on, the more I think we create an alignment and a synergy between administration and council. And then, of course, that helps with communication to the public.
Okay. So, council, we do have a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion on this? And not seeing any, I will call the question. The council recommend council bring the Town of Hinton Strategic Plan 2020-2024 to the November 17th, 2020 Standing Committee meeting for further discussion. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's a tie.
Was it Councillor Wall, were you for?
That was,
Who was the third for?
Not me.
it was only 2 4s.
No, there's three.
There was three.
You did, okay.
It was, I should have went higher.
So you,
I
yeah,
can see that.
Wamagoon Michaels.
Yeah,
sorry.
Wamagoon and Michaels.
Thank you very much.
Not myself.
we had, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Wall.
Well, I was just gonna say, if no one's gonna offer any specific amendments, then I'm gonna seek consensus that committee recommend council bring the town Hinton strategic plan 2020 to 2024, community vision plan to a regular council meeting for decision. If I can speak to it.
Yes, sir.
We've talked around this for a while now, and we look to bring it back to another standing committee to maybe get some amendments made. That was voted down, so I just want to see this move forward as part of the process, so thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question to administration would be, if the plan isn't approved, what does that do to any potential corporate plan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's important to have the strategic direction determined prior to creating a corporate plan that would be brought forward to council for endorsement. That doesn't mean that administration wouldn't follow the same practices we have been following to date, which is creating actions around what we understand Hinton's strategic, or the council strategic plan. It's just a little less focused, and there isn't the sheet of deliverables that council is interested in seeing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I do have to ask a question. So we've been given three options here, but council can craft their own motion. So crafting our own motion is an option to us. So council, we do have a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion? And seeing none, I will call the question. The committee direct administration to bring the town of Hinton strategic plan 2020-2024 to a regular council meeting for a decision. All those in favor? Opposed? Not abstaining. And Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just I understand the frustration. We're trying to go in a multitude of ways. I'm of the mindset, if I don't overly support the strategic plan the way it is, I'd rather just go through the budget process, focus on the next year, and then look at the corporate plan and also this after that. And if we have to get it right later in the year of 2021, then so be it. But I'd rather not support a document that that still has, I think, too many directions, because that's going to create the priority list from administration's viewpoint. So I think we're not in a bad place. I'm happy we didn't move forward with something that we didn't collectively support. So I'm of the mindset of just going on with the budget process and reconvening another day to amend these two together. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Nelson.
I share a lot of what Mayor Michaels is saying. I think one of the pitfalls with our first strategic plan is that council didn't feel true ownership of it. And because of that, we didn't reference it often. We didn't share it with citizens that often. And seeing the conversation that we're having, even if we approved it today, it wouldn't be something that council felt. It's almost like a begrudging acceptance of something because we went through the process. I think we need to have 100% complete ownership of everything we do over the next year if we have any chance of real success and real progress. And I think we do that through the budget process. And, you know, I don't think that day is lost. I think there's a lot of good work done, a lot of opinion shared, I think there's a lot of understanding gained from each other and from administration of what council is looking to do through those meetings. So although maybe we don't have a document that states all those things, I think that conversation, along with budget, along with our existing strategic plan, which in a lot of ways is kind of similar to this in that it's, I don't know the right word for it, but not overly specific, but also too specific at the same time. I think we can productively move forward over the next month with budget and over the next year of our final year as council. So I think we're probably doing the right thing to kind of move past this and crush budget and really succeed at that. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we don't have a motion on the floor. And so with no motion on the floor, would we just consider that this action item number 4 is closed? Is that a no? Okay, we're gonna move on with additional information. Urgent matters from council. I will start with Councillor Nelson.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Councillor Haas.
Nothing for me.
Councillor Maguna.
Yeah, just as an informational piece to council, it's not often that I engage with members of the elective government in a more firebrandy sort of way, but I did express my concerns to one of our regional MLAs from Kananaskis Banff. There was some language that was through her social media, sort of accepting of a bit of a myth that the Canadian federal government was responsible for creating concentration camps in Canada dealing with COVID, and I challenged that. I was not comfortable with that sort of language from an elected official. I called her office, I lodged a concern and asked that she call me. She has not done that yet. And being from a family who emigrated here from Germany post-World War II, that is not something I will stand by. That's not the kind of language I will accept. And I will continue to challenge it. And if that brings any heat on me as a councillor, I own that individually, but I just wanted to share that with you in terms of communication. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Law.
Nothing for me.
Mr. Merritt.
Nothing for me, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. I do have, it's not an urgent matter, it's just an information item. Ash has decided that masks will be compulsory when you enter the guild. They will be charging $1 a mask, and the proceeds for that will go back into the mask fund. The only exception will be when people are on stage, and consideration will be given in some instances for people not wearing masks on stage. And there you go. And our CDO status report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not too much as far as the status report. The action pending list is attached. Will be brought back again November 17th as the second standing committee. There aren't really any changes or questions regarding direction included in this update, but a couple of the dates have changed or will change since this was included in the agenda package. MD 1977, the Permanent Emergency Response Reserve. We're looking at addressing the need for that through MD 1999, Fiscal Management Policy Development. So taking a look at where we can create some synergies between the two. So that's underway. MD 2065, the Disc Golf Association Agreement, that there is a delay in that item coming forward. So I believe that the date on that was to be the end of October. Between the two parties, some additional time is required to work out those details. So that will be forthcoming to council. Otherwise, no additional updates from me.
Thank you. Ms. Patterson. I'm sorry.
Are we able to ask questions about the action pending
Oh, of
list?
course, yes.
So on MD 1686, which is on the second item on the first page, it talks about bring back alternatives to be used to replace the logs and benches and structures in the first quarter of 2019. And so that's on hold, it still hasn't come to us, but in our capital update, it says that the log benches have already been purchased. So I'm just curious, kind of there's an incongruency there, and if that needs to be addressed later, that's fine. It's just a question I have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through to Councilor Nelson. I unfortunately don't have an answer to provide to tonight, if it's acceptable. I may look to Mr. Hawk. I'm sure he came up on the screen because he didn't fill in the answer for me. Mr. Hawk?
Sorry, the sound system I can't hear. I can barely hear. Can you please repeat the question, please?
If I could, I think it could be something that you guys send by email. We have our capital, I think it comes next week. I would assume it comes next week, so maybe we can address it at that time. Thank you.
Did he hear any of that? No, just so that we let him know what's happening in the room. Mr. Hawk, did you hear any of that information?
The system is very low. I can barely hear.
I can chat too.
If it's okay, Madam Chair. Mr. Hawk, we will be receiving that question through email and we'll update council as appropriate after that.
Thank you.
If I get that email, the question, I'll respond to that. Thank you.
Sir, do you have another question?
Did, yeah. MD 2002, which is page 4 of 8, a report on the rec center coming forward was a due date of June 30th. And there's 4 or 5 different other things that are kind of pending that. Are we expecting at any point some sort of report on the rec center so that we can communicate to citizens what we aren't doing over the next really year of our term?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On this item, there was some discussion around the capital plan for 2021 and beyond regarding the water treatment plant and the plans to initiate some of progress on next steps on water treatment plant project. So looking, I believe in the conversation that was had with council, there was a request to bring some of that information forward around the status of the water treatment plant and any decisions through the capital plan that would be made to advance that. So that, I don't know that that was clear in that action item, but my understanding was that before that report on the rec center could come forward, there was additional information required on the water treatment plant and then possible financial impacts.
Good, sir.
Can I follow up on that, Madam Chair? So what would be the timeline, I guess, to get that info for the water treatment plant in conjunction with the rec center follow?
Thank you through to Mayor Michaels. The intention has been to bring that report through the fall, and it has been delayed. Providing that information to council prior to budget was also the intention. Fortunately, I've been working on an update to bring to council and some additional discussions needed before that happens. I would seek to bring something to council before the budget discussion, so at the latest November 17th.
Can I just follow up on water treatment or rec center?
Water treatment plant.
I think one of the concerns I have is that when we started deferring the rec center and waiting, like one thing contingent on the other thing, contingent on the other thing, it's a very different lens now in that different levels of government are through many different ways providing large sums of capital to help communities move forward. And when we initially started deferring all of these things, that was certainly not the case. So I don't know how much longer we want to wait until, like if we're waiting until we have 100% certainty on exactly what's happening to the water treatment plant before we talk rec center, then in my opinion, we should just make a motion to pitch all rec center stuff for the rest of our term, because we're not going to have certainty with the water treatment plant until it's a lot further into its maturity, unless we're going to somehow accelerate that project, which if that's the will of council, then so be it. But I'm struggling because citizens are asking more than ever about things like rec centers, and my only answer is that we're waiting for stuff and it's past when we thought it would come. And so I'm struggling with how to engage citizens specifically with the rec center right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, that's a great conversation piece, especially for right now. I think understanding the reality that, strangely enough, we do have two different levels of government that are working hard to give money to large scale projects is an opportunity. And we have, as a council, we addressed our concern about this certainly earlier on, but I think there's an opportunity here to capitalize on the fact that we've heard from our representatives that there are some avenues that still exist to get large scale funding. And so I think Councillor Nelson's right. This might be a really good avenue early on to pull back from that delayed, we're not going to look at the rec center until we've totally dealt with the water treatment facility, and really pitch, I think, both projects to both levels of government to say, look, here's where we're at. We know you're looking to invest some grant funding. What can you do for us? We've had that request directly from our MLA, right? He's like, come talk to us, get this in front of us. We understand these are not fully fleshed out. Help us help you. Let's do that. Let's capitalize on that. I don't know what else it will take at this table to make that happen, but I'm certainly supportive of moving that forward, getting in front of those representatives to say, what do you need from us as the town of Hinton in order to get money? That's where I want to be right now. Tell me what decision I have to make at the table to support that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. I really wished the director was hearing what you were saying, because he's nodding his head at times, I think agreeing with what you're saying. Go ahead.
Well, just to follow up on that, I guess consider that then a question to both administration and the mayor in conjunction. What do we need to do to get in front of our representatives to have that conversation? And my understanding is that they're very well aware that we're not at the perfect point for these projects. We don't have a fully detailed cost estimate, whatever class it is, but we know these are things we need. So what is it going to take to get in front of our representatives to have those conversations? Because I think we should, right? We should get Martin and we should get Gerald and we should sit them down in a room and say, guys, we need to pitch you because this is a very important time for us. Here's two high-level projects. What can you do for us? Let's get the ball rolling. And if it's a simple conversation like that, great. I'm going to sleep a lot better if I can go to the community and they say to me, what did you do to get money for us? Well, we brought Gerald and Martin into a room and we told them about our needs. And this is what they did or didn't do for us. Great. I feel really good about that. And that starts with a meeting. And that's just the way I see it.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a direction that Council direct administration to bring the water treatment plant report pertaining to MV 2002 the November 17th standing committee meeting. If I may speak to it, our CEO just said that it looks like we can do the 17th. Let's publicly set that date for that conversation, and then after that we can narrow the focus on the rec center. Because I share the exact same concerns as Councillor Nelson. We're sort of in purgatory right now when it comes to it, and that's the first step to get that information that council may need in order to move forward with the choosing what direction to go with the rec center officially, considering we only have less than 12 months to go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, I'm going to try and pitch a direction as well, because I feel like now's the time for it and it's going to make me feel better. I'd like to seek consensus.
Sorry, where there's a motion now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, you're right. I apologize. I just got too excited.
So did you want to take a look at this motion?
No, Madam Chair, I'm good supporting this motion, and then I'll speak to my next motion.
Okay. So council, yes, sir.
I did have a clarifying question. The MD 2002 is rec center, and that's water treatment. I just want to make sure it's clear to administration what that direction is directing.
So if I may, Madam Chair, just sort of reiterating a bit of the conversation that the rec center items will remain unchanged due to, and the reason was getting the report for the water treatment plant needed to come to council prior in order to then continue any of the rec center stuff. I don't know if the CEO would want to elaborate, but that was my understanding, that that's why we were not getting any of the rec center stuff for the date of June 30th, 2020. That there was something impeding it, which was a previous motion or direction in order to halt it. May I ask the administration if that's their understanding of what was holding the rec center coming back?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. That was my understanding. I think perhaps the word pertaining to is the water treatment plant report. I can't think of it. I understand what the motion is directing for administration to bring back the water treatment plant report in order then to advance MD 2002.
So if I may, so the reason I worded it that way, and I'm obviously open to amending it, is that it pertains to that all the information that comes on the 17th will be provided to us in order for us to potentially move forward from starting with 202. So I don't want a water treatment update with then still some information in order to then move forward. I wanted to pertain to 202 because 202 specifically is on hold due to the water treatment plant. Like I said, I'm open to amending it, but to me conceptually, I just want to make sure that any report for the water treatment plant has all the information needed for then us as a council to potentially move forward with 202. Thanks.
Thank you. So I just have to say, all of us in this room know what that means, because you just spoke to it. But for people who aren't in this room and who read it maybe in 2 days, would you want to kind of make mention that MD 2002 is being held up pertaining, because of the water treatment plant? Or its progress is being held up, or?
If I may, in MD 202, it says to seek consensus that all recreation center action items remain unchanged until such time administration brings a report. That report should say the water treatment plant, because that's the one that's holding 202. There was a direction given, I forget when, for that. So the wording in 202 speaks to what I'm saying. It just doesn't say, to my knowledge, that's my understanding.
Council, we do have a motion on the floor. Is there more discussion on this? I will call the question. Let council direct administration to bring the water treatment plant report pertaining to MD-2002 to the November 17th, 2020 standing committee meeting. All those in favor? And Councilor McGowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make the following direction, or seek consensus on the following direction, that council direct administration and the mayor, please, to arrange meetings with both our MLA and MP following the meeting of November the 17th. In regards to funding the water treatment facility project and recreation center project. Then, Madam Chair, if I can speak to that, please.
Yes, sir.
This is born out of the reality that Councilor Nelson had mentioned, in that we have some fiscal opportunities. We did not get a chance to capitalize on certain grants. So as a counselor, in order to do my diligence, I have to make sure that understanding, I think that both of these are necessary for the future of the community, and I've heard people in our community speak to both of them. I have to find creative ways of making them happen. And I know that we have members of our, other orders of government that have said there is money available, there is funding available. I don't care whether or not we have qualified, class estimates at this point in time. I want to get out in front of them and I want to ask for money so that they know darn well what we need as a town. And then that will make me feel a lot better in talking to our citizens. And we've heard from both of our representatives that they want to have those kinds of relationships with us. They want to have those talks. This is a good place to start. And I feel good about this. And just to clarify, I don't mean on November the 17th. I mean, once we've had that meeting on the 17th, then it's more appropriate to have that meeting with those individuals. If we can get them both in the same room at the same time, great. If not, one-on-one, also fine. But our citizens have tasked us with being fiscally creative. I need to go back to them and say, I'm doing my job for you. And this is one of the ways I can do that. So I'd like to ask your support. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Nelson.
A bit of a clarifying question, and this might be up to the mayor and administration to figure out the best process, but if the intent of these meetings is to ask for money, I actually wouldn't be in support. If the intent of meetings is to ask what we need to do to be ready to ask for money, I would be in full support. Because where I struggle is we everything's on hold. We have all these, so without us actually committing to move forward with something, I don't want to ask money for it. I think we need to at least show that we're moving forward with the rec center or moving forward with the water treatment in a more expedited fashion or whatever it is before we ask for money. Like, I don't want to, you only have so many opportunities with your MLAs, your MPs, and different levels of government. I don't want a shotgun approach to this where we're just shooting in hopes we hit something. I want to make sure that it's targeted with maximum impact and saying, what do we need to be ready? And then once we're ready, then take that shot. So as long as there's enough play within that direction for administration and the mayor to do what they need to do, then I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, sir. Councilor McGowan.
Yeah, and just to speak to that, Madam Chair, certainly that latitude I think should exist. That being said, just to speak to your point, in this case, I would respectfully disagree in that I think we already established that the water treatment facility is a need and that making sure it's funded first is paramount. So again, there is a bit of a connection, cause and effect at play. But again, just to speak to your point, no, absolutely not. We need to have latitude to engage in that discussion. Fully agree.
Councilor Watt.
Yeah, I guess I'll just ask a question directly to CAO Wilson and Mayor Michaels. Is this the sort of activity that would just be kind of standard operating procedure? Have you not had these discussions, some preliminary discussions already?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some discussions, some information has been sent to the MLA. And again, any available grant funding, we've been moving on and submitting applications for. I think capturing this intent in a motion to provide some clear direction on next steps coming out from the November 17th meeting is appreciated.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to bring where we are with the application for the water treatment plant so that council is fully aware where we are. So in last January, I started the process of submitting our application and the draft application was submitted, but the application was not completed due to the fact that we needed a council's motion, and I prepared and submitted a council report. But the latest development that time, because of the Mills position or West Fraser's position, we had to pull that report back. And still we don't know either we are going with a bypass option or we are going with another option. That's why the water treatment plant funding application was never been completed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Olson, did you want to speak?
Just a bit of assurance to council that this information will be in the report for council's reference.
Thank you. Councillor McGowan.
Just to speak to the important fact that meeting with both representatives also uncovers other potential grants that we weren't aware of. I think often those meetings, that's one of the strongest things we find out is specific grants that are just coming to the fore that have the potential to provide those revenue streams that we didn't know about. And I think that is integral to the heart of this direction right now, is meeting with our reps so that they can also hear the urgency that we have in providing, you know, these high-level capital services to our citizens. So, thank you.
So council, we do have a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion on this? And seeing none, I will call the question. The council direct administration and the mayor to arrange meetings with both our MLA and MP following the meeting of November 17th, 2020 in regards to funding the water treatment facility project and the recreation center project. All those in favor?
Thank you, council.
Are there any other questions about our action tracking list? Nothing? Okay, we will move on to Ms. Anderson. Do you have anything to add?
Just one reminder, we'll be doing the Christmas photo at the November 3rd meeting, which is next week. So try and be here about 3:15 so Josh is able to take the picture and then go do his YouTube.
Okay, good, thank you. I'm going to call a short break before we okay? Let's say 7 minutes. Thank you, council. We are back in session. I would like a motion to go in camera, please. Mr. Mayor? And all those in favor?
Yeah, you just gotta top the thing.
You know what we're celebrating tonight, you guys? My last night as